Good morning. Hope everyone's having a great morning. I appreciate the thoughts, Alex. That'll tie in right pretty well with what we're going to talk about this morning. An everyday Christian. I like that idea. Living as a Christian today. Anyway, over the past few weeks, kind of in this little series that we've been talking about, we've been going over things that we need to understand when it comes to discipleship. And we've talked about how the disciple is under the teacher. The disciple is not above the teacher. We're not above Jesus. We're under Jesus. We've talked about how he's the one that sets the standards. The disciple is not the one that does that. We know also that one of the first things the disciple ought to do is surrender. We surrender ourselves over to Jesus. Why? Because He has all of the authority. That's why. And then we discuss the kind of heart. The kind of heart a true disciple of Jesus really needs to have. A good heart. We need to have a good heart. One that wants to be in fellowship with God. One that wants to be a student of Jesus. A student of the Word. And grow really into the image of Christ. And so we've talked a lot about some of those things and what discipleship to Jesus looks like. But I want to talk about another very important element that I think needs to be discussed when you're talking about discipleship. And to me, I think it's one that really does drive your discipleship to Jesus. But it's when discipleship becomes personal. When discipleship becomes personal, when it does become personal for you, things really do start to change in your life. I think a lot of us know how it feels when we're passionate about something or when we have a vested interest in something and when it's personal to us. I think we've all probably been there. What happens? Well, we are enthusiastic about those things. We're excited about them. We are devoted to those things. Sometimes we may get a little bit fanatical. We may be a little bit addicted to them. We might get a little bit obsessive over those things at times. But it's because we care about them. They're important to us. They're personal to us. And when something is personal to you, it affects the things that you will do in pursuit of it or because of it. For instance, let's just take a random example. Let's just take the example of trying to pay off a vehicle. You want to pay off your car. Okay, well, if you want to pay that off, and if that really does become personal to you, you're going to change a few things. That might start having an effect on perhaps your spending habits, right? There's going to be certain things that you're going to have to do, certain things that you're not going to do anymore. Things are going to have to change in order for you to have a paid-off car, right? And what would change? Well, you're not going to go out and eat as much. Okay, you may start cooking your meals at home, but you don't know how to cook. You're going to get on YouTube and you're going to learn how to figure out something. That's what I would do. Okay. Yeah, my wife's laughing like, yeah, you better get on YouTube. You don't want me cooking anything. Not in my house. Anyway, she's a lovely cook. I eat everything. But anyway, that's one thing that you might do. I think you would maybe limit your travel a little bit. You don't want to pay for all the fuel anymore. Okay, that goes into this. You may revisit your budget. See where you can cut, see where you can save money. Look at your cell phone bill. Can you cut that down? What am I using per month? Can I lessen that? You just look at any memberships you have, subscriptions that you might be paying for, or whatever it is. Things in your life starts to change a little bit because why? You've got a goal in mind, right? You've got something that you're passionate about, something that's personal to you. And it's you want to pay off your car, so you do those things. And you could talk about that with many different things. But if we're talking about discipleship, to Jesus, and if that's what a person is after, which is, I think, what a person should be after, what changes then in their life when discipleship becomes personal to them? What changes might you have then? Well, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that and talk about a few changes this morning that might take place and things that do take place when it becomes personal to you. All right, so let's talk about the first one. When discipleship becomes personal, your mindset changes. Your mindset changes. Like our example of paying off the car, when you lock on to something, it's pretty hard to get your mind away from it, isn't it? I mean, it's quite difficult, really, to steer a person in another direction when they are laser focused on a goal. You know, their attitude about it is very strong. Their conviction about it is evident. They've kind of got this go-getter mentality. The mindset changes. Well, you know, whenever a person becomes a Christian, I think a lot of what repentance is, a lot of what chasing after Jesus is setting your mind on Jesus. Setting your mind on Him. Putting your thoughts completely on Jesus all the time. I love what, I've referenced this a lot, I love what Paul says in Colossians chapter 3. It's verses 1 through 3. He says, "Therefore, if you have been raised up with Christ, keep seeking the things above where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on the things above, not on the things that are on the earth." Okay, so in that you have two commands. He says, listen, if you have been raised up with Christ, that's absolutely baptismal language right there. If you've been raised up through the waters of baptism, you've been raised a new creature into a new life. If you've been raised up with Christ, keep seeking the things above where He is. Well, you say, what are those things? What are the things above? Well, those are the good things, right? Those are the good things. Those are the godly things. Those are the heavenly things, things that are worth seeking. So things like righteousness, let's seek that out. Things like God's reign and God's rule over my life. You know, seek things that God would have you do. Seek loving God with all that you have. Seek loving your neighbor as yourself. Seek compassion, humility, and patience and peace. And seek out forgiveness and love. Seek after those things. Look for them. Desire them continually. That's really what you're doing. Seek after them. But also, he says, set your mind on them. So it's not just a seeking after them, it's setting your mind on those things. Which means have an attitude toward them. Think on them, ponder them, consider those things. If you've been raised up with Christ, let the good and godly things be a part of your everyday thinking, Mr. Rawson, every single day. That's where your mind needs to be. Okay? It doesn't need to be set on the things of the earth. Okay? The things that ought to consume your mind as a Christian are not the fleeting things of this earth. That's what he says. And so, if discipleship is personal to you, there's going to be a mindset change. There's going to be a shift in your thinking. But look what he says as to why. Look at verse 3. Why? For you died, and your life has been hidden with God. He says you died. Well, what did you die to? You died to sin. That's what you died to. That's Romans 6 and verse 2. You died to sin. You died and you put away everything that was separating you from God. Whenever you decided to become a Christian, that's what you did. That's the decision you made. That's why now you need to set your mind on God, because you're done with all of that stuff. You're done now chasing after the things of the world. You're done living a life that is contrary to God. You're in a different place now, and discipleship is what you're after. And so the mindset changes. I know it's not exactly the context, but I really like I think it really does fit with this. After Jesus had told his disciples in Matthew chapter 16 and verse 21 that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed and be raised up on the third day. Whenever Jesus told his disciples that's when Peter actually takes the Lord aside. Peter takes Jesus aside and he starts to rebuke Jesus, and he says, God forbid that. God forbid it, Lord. This shall never happen to you. And that's when Jesus takes him aside and he says, you get behind me, Satan. Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. Why? Look what he says. Because for you are not setting your mind on God's interests, but man's. Again, I know it's not exactly what we're talking about, but that right there, that is the idea that we're talking about. Okay, that's it. So when discipleship really does start to become personal to you, you know what happens? You start putting your mind on God's interests and not on man's interests. That's how that happens. Amen. That's how that works. That's the idea. And for that matter, it's not even on your own interests. And when it's personal to you, I mean, everything just starts to change. What you think about as important, and what you see that's valuable and good and righteous, are things that God sees are important. And things that God values, and things that God sees are good and righteous. You begin to really understand what's most important in this life. I mean, you'll start to put more of an emphasis on the things that are important spiritually. The way that your mind views and looks at sin will be different. You may not treat it as casually as you did before, maybe. Things that you do, you really start to think, is this something that God would have me do? Is this something that Jesus would do? You even start seeing the world through spiritual lenses. You start trying to see things as God sees things. You start trying to see people as God sees people. I mean, I know for me, I could tell that my mind had started to change whenever, like after I became a Christian and everything. Because whenever I would be in a room full of people, take like the airport or something like that, and you're finally at your gate and you're just sitting there and you're waiting around, right, for your plane and stuff. Aside from people watching, because I do that also, but the other thing that I've caught myself doing a lot, and still do really, if I'm in a crowd of people, I would think about all of the souls that are in that room. And I would think about, I wonder how many of them have a right relationship with God. I would think about those things. I wonder how many of them are really trying to do what God wants them to do. And you know what? That concerns me. That's the thing. It concerns me now. I'm concerned about that. And that's what I'm saying. Your mindset, it completely starts to change when discipleship to Jesus becomes personal to you. And you really start taking it seriously then. Your mental wiring starts to be reconstructed. That's what happens. But when your mindset, here's what else happens. When your mindset starts to change like that, you know what? Your life also starts to change. Your life also starts to change, and there starts to be what we might call a transformation. And that's the second point. When discipleship becomes personal to you, your life begins to transform. When Paul wrote to the saints at Rome, that would be in the book of Romans, the letter to the Romans. When he wrote that, you find in chapter 12 of Romans, he brought to their attention something. He said that they don't need to be conformed to this world, but instead they need to be transformed. But catch it, look what it says, transformed by the renewing of your mind, he says, so that you may approve what the will of God is, that which is good and pleasing and perfect. When discipleship to Jesus becomes personal to you, I think this passage here becomes personal to you. You know, you start to live not a conformed life to and like the rest of the world, but a transformed life into something new and away from the world. You move away from the things that you may have conformed yourself to that were a part of this world. You move away from that. You know, you may have been involved in something or been a part of something that wasn't what God wanted, but now you're trying to be more of a disciple, and so you start to transform your life, and now you conform yourself to better things. You conform to better things now. And so the things that you do starts to change, and that seems to fit, right? Because the things that affect your mind actually start to affect your actions. You know, now you might start moving things around in your life and with your routine to where you're actually trying to make more time for God now. Now that discipleship is on the mind, now Bible study is on the mind. Now built-in prayer time is on the mind. Coming to Bible class to learn more and get equipped more is on the mind. You know, you want to study, you want to pray, you want to build up your relationship with God. You start moving from something that maybe you felt pressured to do into something that now you feel compelled to do. There's a personal conviction about you now. Your pursuit of discipleship starts to affect your decisions. You might make decisions with other people in mind now and not just yourself. You may decide that you should try to serve more, sacrifice more. You decide that you're going to handle situations differently than you have in the past. Your first thoughts start to be more kingdom-minded and focused on God's will and not your own. You start having these feelings about how you want to be a part and around the church more. Be a part of the body, be built up by the body. You want to encourage other people in the body. Even how you view evangelism starts to affect your approach. I mean, it pretty much takes care of itself at that point. I mean, you have a concern for people. You understand their need for the gospel and their need for Jesus. You start being more intentional, more strategic in your approach. And even, you go so far as to go out of your way to try and build up a relationship with people because you know the value of the relationship with Jesus, and you know they need that too. That's the things that you do. When discipleship becomes personal to you, transformation becomes real. Let that sink in for a minute. When discipleship becomes personal to you, transformation to Jesus will be real for you. It sure will. And it's a willing transformation too. It's a willing transformation. It's a transformation that you want to take place. And you want it to take place because why? Because you love God. And you understand what He's done for you and what Jesus has done for you. And so that makes you want to serve Him. You get it. You start having this internal drive about you to where you want to be better, you want to try and change to be more like Jesus. That's what happens when discipleship becomes personal. You are transformed into a new person, one that looks like Jesus. But when you have a mind that's changed and a life transformed, because discipleship is personal to you, I think a natural flow from that is you get this right here. You get a faith that's committed. You get a faith that's committed. When you allow your mind and your life to be changed and transformed, everything about the faith that you have gets stronger. Your faith is no longer hanging out on the surface. It goes deeper than that. And because it's deeper, discipleship and being more like Jesus, it's now something that you're committed to, and you seek to mature in that. And so when you have a committed faith, you start to be a whole lot more consistent in your faith. You're more regular in your practice now. It's not something that you do or something that you have your mind focused on every now and then. No, now living for Jesus and doing things for Jesus and things that Jesus would be pleased with is something that starts to be just a natural extension and part of your life. Your mind is focused on that all the time now. You're steadily trying to walk the narrow road. You actively try to walk in the light, and because you are committed to it, you don't give up when things get tough. You don't fall away when the Word starts bringing some conflict into your life. When your faith is tested a little bit because of trials and hardships that come along, you stand firm. You don't run. You don't run and you don't quit, and you for sure don't give up on God just because some things get tough. Because you're committed, you don't let your discipleship get lazy or lax. You stay on top of it. You become all about Jesus. And because of your commitment, you don't just talk about Jesus anymore. You live like Jesus. You live like Him. That's the end goal of discipleship after all. To get to the point to where you're fully committed to Christ and you're a disciple of His. Let's think about this as we close. What would happen if everybody took discipleship personally? What would happen? What would happen if everybody just had, a complete head change and all the time sought after things above? All the time had their minds set on things that are not earthly? What would happen if people allowed themselves to be transformed into something new with a totally committed faith to Jesus? I think you'd see quite a bit of difference everywhere. Right? You should. I think you would see people, I think what you would see in people is such a drive in them that, you wouldn't have to convince them at all that they should be more like Jesus, because they want to be more like Jesus. You wouldn't have to, constantly push people to serve or grow or study their Bibles. Again, evangelism starts taking care of itself, really, because it becomes a natural thing. It's always on the mind. It's not forced. It would affect families, I think, and how things are in the home. Relationships with people might look different. How you treat people would look different. How you would have more forgiveness going around, more love going around, and a lot less hate and anger. Congregations would get stronger. Everybody in the church would have a deeper commitment. All of that changes when discipleship becomes personal. But if it doesn't, nothing changes. Nothing changes. But it really isn't a question about, okay, what would happen if everybody else? What would happen if everybody else took discipleship personally? No. I think you need to get personal with yourself and honest with yourself in that, and then ask yourself, okay, what would happen if I took it personally? What would happen if I took it personally? I'm not suggesting you don't. I'm just saying, what would happen if every single day I literally tried to just be the best disciple that I could be to Jesus in my thoughts and my actions and everything? What if I took it so personal? What if? What would change? What would change in your life? Think about that. At this place, we want to be in the business of making disciples. Jesus commanded that. We believe in that. We want to be the best version of disciples that we can be. That's what we want. So look, if you need help in your discipleship, maybe you even have been contemplating actually becoming a disciple of His, and maybe you've been actually contemplating, I want to become a Christian. I want to see what that's all about. We're in the business here of making disciples. We can help you with that. If you have questions about it, please let somebody know about it so that we can help you. We want to help you. That's what we're here for. If you need anything, we're going to sing a song of invitation, and that's your time. You want to let somebody know, you can do it as we stand and sing, or you can let somebody know after this. But don't leave if you got questions. Thank you. Let's stand and sing.